What if what we call public opinion was just a manufactured narrative that makes it easier to convince people that if their views are different, then there's something wrong with that, or there's something wrong with them?
Spending is a tax. As soon as the government spends money, eventually it's a tax. Sometimes we put a direct tax on the people, sometimes we borrow the money, and sometimes we print the money.
Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth.
The Patrick Riggins Show. And now your host, Patrick Riggins.
Welcome to the Patrick Riggins Show. Kick-starting your weekend here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. That's a good song to get you going on Saturday. We are back again this week with more logic and reason to liberate yourself from the fog of disinformation that permeates just about all aspects of the media in this country. Piercing that fog, that clouded thinking, is the bright, shining light of the Libertarian Lighthouse Radio Network, of which this show is the capstone, the pinnacle of an already superior radio network. Each week I am here, me, Patrick Riggins, to give you the information you need to convert those who would sell your rights down the road, all in the name of security. And a lot of times, patriotism. Those are just two of the myriad of reasons given for this government to remove from you your God-given natural human rights. Well, many other talk shows will tell you that is the correct thing to do, to give up some of your rights for the so-called collective good, for the village, for the country. Yes, even conservative talk shows and their hosts will espouse this very thing. And yes, I'm also including the national news and talk shows in that, both on radio and television. If you listen with the libertarian filter, the original American values filter, you'll start to hear these things being said, all cloaked in the attractive garment of patriotism, or the war on terror, or the war on drugs. Speaking of which, you ever wonder why we have so many, quote, wars? It's because during the times of war, the government can argue that drastic action must be taken to defeat whatever foe it is we're fighting. But did you ever notice that action always demands that you give up some of your freedom, while the government is never asked nor demanded to cut back on its encroachment? Now, speaking of too much government, this I.R.S. scandal has people talking about revamping the tax system in our government. Now, I don't hold out much hope for that actually happening, but maybe I can put some ideas in your head to discuss with your friends, family, and neighbors. And if you get asked where you get such crazy ideas, you can tell them right here on the Patrick Riggins Show and invite them to listen so they can get crazy ideas like freedom and liberty for American citizens. But getting back to the tax system, people talk about this flat income tax or changing over to some different graduated income tax. This is the wrong way to think about it. We need to think in terms of getting rid of the income tax, getting rid of the I.R.S., because there'd be no need for it if we did away with the income tax. The reason we have it is to fund all these social programs. Without all the money coming in from the income tax, we couldn't afford them, and we shouldn't be doing them anyway. Now, look at what a tax is for. A tax is to pay for a resource you're using. And if you drive a car on the road, you pay a registration tax, which is supposed to go for the upkeep of the roads and repaving, that sort of thing. Because you're using the road, you pay a road use tax to help keep it up. So when you tax someone's income, what are they using that requires paying a tax? How does earning money warrant a tax? What resource are you using? Nothing. If you have a building out of which you run your business, you are already paying property and utility taxes. All the resources you're using, you're paying a tax on already. Your delivery vehicles, you pay a registration tax. Now, on top of all that, you have to pay a tax just for the privilege of earning a living? And a large chunk of that money is going to people who don't want to earn a living, but somehow deserve one, somehow deserve a portion of everything you make. A percentage of everything you earn goes to support someone who doesn't have a job and probably isn't particularly interested in getting one either. How is that right? Therein lies the problem. This is a fundamental problem with this whole tax funding model, the whole way this is set up. Now, states can keep up roads within their borders. If they can't, then their citizens need to raise their road taxes to accommodate that. But by doing it federally, I'm paying for roads in other states that I'll never ever use. And they're paying for roads in my state they'll never use. There are not any roads in this nation that aren't contained within a state. Therefore, there aren't any roads that the state shouldn't have jurisdiction over and subsequent responsibility for their upkeep. So you'll say, but Patrick, what about the interstate system? Well, what about that? Well, that's all contained within each state's jurisdiction and responsibility to keep up their highway system. If they don't, they'll start seeing a drop-off in businesses wanting to locate there. And if people within that state want to have jobs, they'll make sure their roads are up to par. Now, the states send money to the federal government, and then they take a big cut and turn around and send the money right back to the states. Now, how is that logical? Why not have the states keep the money and repair their own interstates? Well, it's money and power. That's why. The federal government wants to retain the power over the states. It wants to be able to dictate laws, rules, regulations, things that the state should be doing for itself. The federal government, it wants to be able to do that. To retain this power, it controls the money flowing back to the states, money that originally came from the states in the first place. Now, some states will have less traffic on their roads, and thus their road use taxes will be less, while states with more traffic will probably have higher road use taxes because of the increased wear and tear on their roadways. The people of each state can balance their needs as far as roads are concerned versus how much money they're willing to pay for them. Getting back to my original question, though, what government agency has a legitimate claim to your income? Well, none. That's who. In case you didn't know the answer to that question. There is not one reason any government person or agency can lay claim to the money you make through your own efforts, outside of use taxes, that is. Do you know one of the main ways the mafia makes money? It's by extortion. That is, they go into a business, they tell the owner of the business they owe the mafia a percentage of whatever he is earning. And in return, what does the mafia offer? Well, for one thing, the owner gets to live and not be hurt, get his knees broken. For another, he gets to keep his business intact and running. So how is this at all different from what the government's doing? The government says it has a claim to part of your earnings, money you earn through your own hard work. And for this, the government says you can stay out of jail, that you can keep your business running and intact. Otherwise, they're going to come in and shut you down, just like the mafia does. They'll even hurt you, maybe even kill you, if you resist this intrusion onto your private property by someone looking to extort money from you. So while what the mafia does is referred to as extortion, racketeering, when the government does it, it's business as usual. Now, the definition of racketeering is it's a service that is fraudulently offered to solve a problem, such as for a problem that does not actually exist, will not be affected, or would not otherwise exist. Now, how is this not what the government does 80% of the time? We even make jokes about the government finding solutions for problems that don't exist, making citizens and businesses comply with regulations and laws for which the problem is not evident or even valid. And yeah, it's funny, but it's also illegal. It's racketeering by the government. Yet when they do it, it's okay. But if the mafia does it, it's illegal. Now, does that sound fair to you? If I do something, I'm not prosecuted. But if you do the exact same thing, into court you go. If you're convicted of doing the same thing I was doing, you'll pay a fine and more than likely have to do jail time as well. That sounds like a country that has as its basis fair and just treatment of all citizens, doesn't it? All right. We're up on the first break here on the Patrick Riggin Show. We have just an absolutely packed show. When we come back, we'll talk about, what we usually talk about. The government being a little bit tyrannical. And we'll try to get some stuff about Google and nullification and maybe even free speech if we can work it in. Here on the Patrick Riggin Show, we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Well,